George Goldman. George Goldman.
He was in
He's from the old time, like
at least 50 years.
yeah, one of the older members.
Don't lie.
I'm not. I'm working hard here.
He was a regular volunteer in Israel.
Yeah, he did a lot of good. He's a very special person. So that's that. Okay, so Parshas Chukas. Are we ready? Parshas Chukas, page 838. 838. So what we're going to do today, we're going to talk about three things. And that's it. Three topics we're going to address. Number one relates to the idea, a very Jewish idea, the value of life. There's value in life. Number two is that we do believe in Jewish tradition that there's some kind of progression of humanity. There's progress being made. You look outside, you look what's happening in the world, you might question it at times. But we do believe that if you step back and look at the big picture, there's some kind of progress that is taking place indeed. That's number two. So what was number one?
Value of life.
Good, okay. Number two. Oh, now we have class. Thank you. I already made my shahakal on water or something. So three things we're going to be talking about today. Number one is the value of life. Number two, that there is some kind of progress that's occurring in humanity. Step back, look at human history, read one of your big books of human history, and you will recognize that indeed there is some kind of progress that's taking place. Number three is the idea of what we will call grateful existence. Grateful existence and how to live by it. So those are the three things we're going to try to cover. Parashat Chukas is a loaded parasha. We're just going to run through a little bit what we are going to be addressing. So number one, the first thing you have on page 838 is the red heifer, the red cow. The text itself tells us the recipe, how to prepare these ashes by burning the red heifer, and you have these very special ashes. Once you have these ashes, the text is going to tell us what exactly we do with it. What we do with it is we purify a person who became tameh. How do you become tameh? So turn to page 840. And we are told here the following. Verse 13 on page 840. Kol hanogea bemet. If a person touches a dead body of a human being. Benefesh adam asher yamut. And if a person comes in contact with a corpse and does not go through this process of purification that is achieved with the ashes of the red heifer, and he enters into the sanctuary, that is a terrible sin. He has contaminated the tabernacle of God, and nichreta hanefesh shahi me'ameh, the person will be cut off from Israel. Why? He did not pure himself as he entered. Now, next verse is going to give us another piece of information that relates to this idea of tumah, that we come in contact with the corpse. It could actually be that you come in contact with the rodent, or with a vessel that touched the corpse, or you come in contact with a sword. You become tameh. These are laws that we are less familiar with today, but at a time that every single person was thinking of trying to make their way onto the Temple Mount, so these laws were far more significant and there was awareness of their details. Verse 14, we are told, Zot HaTorah, you should know that this is the teaching, Adam ki yamut ba'oel, a man who dies in a tent. So don't think that contact with the corpse means that you actually touched it, or that you touched an item that touched the corpse, but rather even by just entering into the tent where there is a corpse, even if you just enter into a building where there is a Jewish corpse, you are impacted by that tumah, by that spiritual impurity. And that's what we are told in verse 14. Kol haba el ha'oel, whoever enters into that tent, V'chol asher ba'ol yitma for shivat yamim. And then we are told if you have an open vessel, in that tent or in that structure where there's a corpse, so items in that open vessel, if it is not sealed well, become tameh as well. How are they purified? With the ashes of the red heifer. Now, these laws of tumah, tahara, are complex. In addition, for those of us who feel more comfortable or find more meaning in the text when we could relate to it, when we can find something that relates to our life, that gives us some kind of message, we have difficulty with this concept in general. Now, Maimonides, the Rambam, in the guide of the perplexed, and Moreh Nevuchim tells us the following that you should know. God Almighty wants us to grow spiritually. He wants us to be inspired by educators and inspired by people who live a life of meaning and of service of God. The proper location of such inspiration is Yerushalayim and the Bet HaMikdash. You go there, you enter into the Bet HaMikdash, you see the service, you see their attitude, you see their love, you see their commitment, you see their righteousness, you see them educating the people and promoting the values of justice and of kindness and of tzedakah. You are inspired. Now, we know very well that if there is something that you do on a daily basis, your inspiration is minimized. Have you ever davened? Have you ever davened, right? If you daven daily, you know it's a challenge. If we would have the opportunity to daven once a year, it would be a little bit different. We would prepare ourselves, we would meditate, we would probably study about prayer a few days before, we would have a class, Shabbat afternoon, about the significance of prayer, and then we would get dressed, and we would come in, and the prayer would... So we have that challenge as humans that if it is done on a regular basis, its significance is minimized. True? True. Does that mean you should stop praying 364 days a year? No. But you should rather try, we should all try, or I should try at least, to do my best to encourage myself that it's significant even though I did it yesterday. Comes Maimonides and he tells us the following. You should know. God wants your experience in the temple, your experience in Yerushalayim, your experience by visiting that significant city to have an impact on you. If you could make your way into the temple any day or at any state you choose, the impact will not be there. So he establishes these laws. It's a very rational approach, obviously. He establishes these laws because by coming up with all these laws of Tumah, the Almighty is limiting your access to the location. By limiting your access, your visits will not be on a frequent basis. They're not going to be frequent. You go, it's going to be an experience. It's going to have an impact. That's what the Almighty wants. So this is the Rambam's approach. I feel it. I visit the Kotel. I don't visit often the Kotel, right? I haven't been there in 2 years, 11 months, and 23 days, right? So I know that we're close to 3 years when I was there last, where we met there last time 3 years ago. So the impact of a Kotel visit is a very significant one, right? You're in awe, you think about it, you prepare. So we're taking this message of the Rambam, the person who visits there daily. Many of them are obviously on a very high spiritual level, who have somehow the ability to train themselves to have the impact, but we have here a message why Tumah exists. Now the Rambam gives us a beautiful message for this general concept. He doesn't really deal with specifics. He's not going to give us a reason that applies to specifics. And I want to address one specific law and to find some kind of rational explanation. So now, as you know, the Talmud is an internal text for us, the Jewish people. And it talks about us, it guides us, due to the fact that we have suffered over the past 2,000 years from the hands of the Romans and the Christians, and the list goes on and on. So quite often, if someone is persecuted and suffers from a stronger party, there will be negative statements about that greater party, and it's fair. But overall, I think we're an impressive nation here, because even with all we have gone through, overall, the general message of the Talmud is responsibility to humanity. Chaviv Adam Nivra B'Tselem. All human beings have value, which is an incredible statement. To be the Jew, right, being burnt at stake or being killed by the sword of these crusaders, and yet call out and say, you know what, humanity has value. We have quite an impressive text there in our Talmud and in our rabbinic sources. Nevertheless, there are some harsh statements there. Few, but they do exist, and I justify them 100%. I have absolutely no issue with them. There's a general theme and there are specifics. However, throughout the ages, anti-Semites, usually representatives of the church, with assistance of Jews who abandon faith and believe that they will find personal favor if they bring out or they present the negative aspects of the Jewish faith. They focus on those statements and they present them to the world and they say, look how terrible the Jews are. They say some awful things about the Gentiles. Like, for example, there's a statement in the Talmud, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, Tov shebagoyim harog. Right? If the best of the non-Jews, you shall kill him. Right? Obviously, you have to put it in context there. He's being persecuted, and he's told there are some nice people there that want to help you from the Romans. Right? There's some friendly Romans that don't worry about them. They're not going to tell authorities. And he says, if they are very, very friendly, I know very well what happens with such people. They are out to kill me as well. So you take a statement that in context makes sense and is 100% ethical. You take it out of context, it machzoris far the Yidden makes a lot of difficulties for the people of Israel. You can find websites, not that I'm promoting any of them, websites online about the Talmud and the Jews and how terrible they are. And anti-Semites throughout the ages have picked up their magnifying glass to identify such statements. One of them is based on a verse in this week's Parsha, where we are told in verse 14, let's look at it again, Zot HaTorah, Adam ki yamut ba'oel. In other words, you should know that the laws of Tumah of the corpse are such that not just if you touch it, but even if you walk into the same tent. Comes the Talmud and shares with us the opinion of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and he says the following, you should know that this unique law, that you could become spiritually contaminated with Tumah by just entering under the same roof with the corpse, applies specifically if it is a Jewish corpse, if it's a Jew that passed away. On the other hand, if it is a non-Jew, true, if you actually touch the corpse of the non-Jew, there is Tumah there, no question about that, but this unique law that it spreads throughout the tent, and that by just entering it has an impact on you, that relates specifically to the Jew. Why? Because it says here, Adam ki yamut ba'ohel. And the Talmud tells us, in the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Atem kru'im Adam. That this title of honor of Adam applies specifically to the Jewish people. Ein umot ha'olam kruim Adam, but when it comes to the nations of the world, they are not given this title. So therefore, this law that is introduced with the word Adam applies specifically to Jews. This is a statement in the Talmud. Boy, has this statement been quite problematic for us, because people have taken it and basically said, you see, what are Jews saying? What does their holy text say? That the Jews look at Gentiles as subhumans, right? There's a big question now, like the attitude towards Quran is, what is Islam? Is it a religion of love? Is it a religion of hate? So I myself, I'm not an expert, but I do believe very much that you cannot really understand a religion from the outside. You have to really, really know the religion from within inside to know its true messages. And regarding my religion, I thank God know my religion. And I'm very, very comfortable with my religion as a person that is concerned for the welfare of humanity. And I actually learned that from my religion because we are told, and this is a very clear statement, Chaviv Adam Nivra B'Tselem. And the people I interacted with, my teachers, my educators, ones who live by the religion, had that same approach to humanity. So I have no question about the general approach of Judaism, and I know what we are about, but these statements do need some kind of clarification, and they have caused us great sorrows throughout the ages. It's interesting to note that in about 103-4 years ago in Russia, there was a fellow by the name of Mendel Bayless. He's well known because there was a famous trial of Mendel Bayless where he worked at an observant Jew working in Tsarist Russia. A corpse of a Christian child is found. He is, of course, the one that is taken into custody. They have witnesses, quote unquote, that he killed the child, and in the trial itself, the text that was produced to prove that he is guilty is that Jews actually do this. This is part of what Judaism is about. And Jews don't look at Gentiles as human beings because look at these Talmudic statements. And they were basically, the government, Tsarist Russia, was going to throw him or execute him. But as Jews, we got together, and that's what Jews do, that there was tremendous pressure on Russia from all areas of Europe and even from the United States. And the Russians had to take that into consideration at that time. So they know one of the statements that the Jews or the Jewish lawyer had to defend the Talmud, not just defend Bayless, but defend the Talmud, that Judaism does not believe in such statements that others are subhuman, was Atem Kurim Adam, Ve'enu Matalam Kurim Adam. Look at the Jewish text. It says straight out that you look at the others as subhumans. So one of the answers sent to the lawyer to present to the court was sent by the Rebbe Rashav, the Lubavitcher Rebbe of the time. And he told them the following, that this is an explanation that you should give. That you should explain to the court that when we are told Atem Kurim Adam, it means that the people of Israel as a whole are called Adam, one person. On the other hand, when it comes to the other nations, you don't find that all of humanity is called one person. And he explains, said the Lubavitcher Rebbe, when it comes to the Jewish people, if just as when you look at a person, and if let's say you injure their left pinky, and they slap you back with the right hand, no one's going to say, what kind of chutzpah does the right hand have to slap me back? All I was doing, I was attacking the left pinky. What business does the right hand have? We all understand that that is absurd because this is one unit, this is one body. So too, said the Lubavitcher Rebbe, when it comes to the people of Israel, you should know that if you hurt a Jew in Russia, there's going to be an uproar throughout the Jewish world because we are like one person. This was the explanation that he presented, which was brilliant because he had a way of dealing with the text, but at the same time he was sending a message there to the Russians. You be careful because we do have power, and especially anti-Semites believe that Jews have far more power than we actually do, and you're going to hear from us. So this is what occurred. So this is one of those statements that we have to deal with. So what I would like to do is present a little bit of a way of dealing, to some extent, with the concept of Tumah, and will perhaps give us some clarity regarding this specific statement. And it works as follows. Whenever you say that there is Tumah, it has a very negative connotation, but the truth is, what you are saying basically is that when the body no longer has its partner, the soul, there's something impure there, right? There's a void. Because when something significant leaves, a void is created. And the message we are supposed to take from it is not so much you hear about a corpse, you think it's tumah, but rather, when you see a live person, any human being, you should know that what you are looking at is the opposite of tumah. You are looking at tahara, at kedusha. You are looking at something that is holy. You see a human being, there's something holy there. And just as we all understand that no one's going to start taking books out of Hebrew books, Sfarim, and start jumping on them. And no one's going to go ahead and take the Sefer Torah and use it as a way of supporting a table, because we all understand that this is a vessel of holiness, and there's a proper way to treat it because it is kadosh. So too when it comes to a human being. In other words, instead of focusing on the fact that when the soul departs, there's a void and there is tumah. That's not what we want to walk away with. We want to understand that there is a void when the soul leaves. What does that teach us? That there is great value in life. That's what Judaism is about. And we talk about neshama. We say that a lot in our tefillah. Kol neshama tehalelka. That every soul praises God. The neshama are the same words as neshima, a breath. Every single human being that breathes, right, that is given the oxygen and is able to have circulation and to live, it is a gift from God. And there is sanctity because they basically are vessels that were given a tafkid, a mission to achieve something. That is Jewish values. So true, there is a void when it leaves. We all understand that when you do something significant, you come back from an awesome vacation, there's a feeling a little bit of that void, right? You come back, at least for me, you come back from Israel, it's a very difficult experience. Why is it a difficult experience? I'm on a high, and now I'm back, and very nice people here, but the reality is that the land is not where I feel that connection and comfort. There's a void. Instead of focusing on the void, it would be logical to reminisce about those 2 weeks in Israel and think about the experience. So focus on the good. Humans have value. Now, what we have to remember is that we Jews are humans, but there is something even more significant because we have the ability to impact the world. When it comes to the kedusha of others, the human being has sanctity. We Jews have sanctity that impacts others. You know that when Jews do things, Jews makes news, right? When it is a Jew, you think that Jared Kushner, he is followed. The world follows it. How much of it is the fact that he is Jewish, that he is Orthodox, that he goes to synagogue, right? There's a fascination when there are Jews involved. Jews have an impact that could be to the good, right? There are magnificent stories of Jews who have a good impact. When I saw the video of the president of Home Depot, who goes to areas that were impacted in the south from hurricanes and tornadoes, and he goes ahead and he builds shop there and he starts giving out goods. Whatever you do need to fix your home, come from water to wood, lumber, whatever is given, he gives out because he realizes that these are people that have no homes at this time. And he's interviewed and he's asked, this incredible devotion and acts of charity, what inspired you? He says, well, I go to a synagogue or there's a temple and I've learned Jewish values include tzedakah. That is the Jew having an impact on the world. Not that others cannot, but there's a level we reach that is quite impressive. So with that, if our kedusha spreads, so obviously after 120, when there's a void, the void matches that sanctity, and therefore, when it comes to the non-Jew, there is tumah because there is a void, but it's limited. When it comes to the Jew, the loss, just as the sanctity and the tahara was a positive impact on others, so too the tumah spreads. It can have an impact if you're just under the same roof. There is an impact there. This is a little bit of a message we could take when it comes to a section that is a chok. It is one that's hard to comprehend, but it's the idea of the impact that we do have, the impact that we could have, and there are endless stories that are very, very inspiring of people of Israel who live their life. But the message number one is what? What was the first point we were going to address today? Value of life. Value of life. That's very much Jewish, and it's extremely important that any system of education, especially a religious one, should not start off with religious teachings. It has to start with the value of existence. It has to start, that's number one, right? Modeh ani lefanecha, the 3 most important words we say in the day. Gratitude, right? Ani, the me, the value of the me. After I have the value of the me and the value of the fact that I exist, then I could go ahead and say that I'm happy to be in front of God and be willing to use the me to serve Him. But if a person does not have self-respect, self-value, self-appreciation, they wonder what the purpose of life is. When you could have on TV a series that talks about, not that I know too much about it, but I know that it addresses suicide. And there was a series, something that schools had to struggle and deal with. Something called 13 something. 13 ways. Not that I know enough about it, but the fact that there could even be a conversation indicates that message number one of the educator is value life, value yourself. Look at what you could do. Look at this incredible world. Obviously, if they start from a very young age, telling them that, listen, everything is random, and we're just very sophisticated monkeys, and we evolved, and we're not more than that. So if you think of yourself as a monkey, so well, I'm a monkey that's not happy because others have more bananas than me, so why live, right? So this is a very significant problem. Value life. That is message number 1. Now it's time for message number 2, a shorter message. So let's move on to page 842. In the merit of Miriam, our rabbinic tradition teaches us, what did they have? They had the well. They had the well. This is a miraculous well that travels with them throughout the wilderness, provides water. She passes, the merit is gone, they have no water. They complain to Moshe Rabbeinu. Now this is not the first time that the people of Israel want water and complain for water. The exact same issue appears in Parashat Beshalach, right after the crossing of the Red Sea, where Moshe Rabbeinu is approached, Vaser, we need the water, right? Evian or whatever, Periah, they wanted water. And Moshe Rabbeinu takes the staff with him, that is there. He hits the rock and they have water. Remember that story? Now Moshe Rabbeinu expects a repeat because the Almighty tells him, go ahead, take the, let's go to verse 8 on page 842. So when God tells him to start dealing with the water issue, the water problem in the Middle East, what's the first thing he tells him? Kach, what do you take with you? Your tools, et hamateh. So if you would be Moshe Rabbeinu, you expect that if the Almighty takes you to carry it, you're not carrying it just for show, it's not just for the photographers or future artists to go ahead and have a picture of you with the staff, but rather it must be playing a role in the water production here. And he is told in verse 8, Va'kel et ha'edah, go ahead and gather together the assembly. Have Aaron with you. And here things start going interesting. V'dibartem el hasela, start talking to the rock before their eyes, le'eineihem. V'natan meimav, that is what he is told here. Moshe does that. Vayikach Moshe, next page, tamateh. As he was commanded, and Vayikalu Moshe v'Aaron et hakal et pnei hasela, they gather the congregation in front of the rock, and he calls out, you rebels, because you are complainers, have no faith. Shimuna Amorim, you really believe that I could get water out of this rock? And here we go, verse 11, the sin of Moshe Rabbeinu. Are you ready for the sin of Moshe Rabbeinu? Mm-hmm. Right, Halavai Afanala, right? Vayarem Moshe es yado, he raises his arm. Vayachet hasela, he struck the rock with his staff. B'mateu pa'amayim. Vayetzumayim rabim, and there's plenty of water there. Vatesh ta'edah, and the nation, the assembly, could drink and even had enough for their animals. Verse 12, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe vel Aaron, oh, because you did not believe in me, Yan lo emantem bi, la'akdisheni, you did not sanctify me in the eyes of the children of Israel. Therefore, lachen lo taviu et hakal hazeh la'aretz asher natati lahem. You're not going to make your way to the land of Israel. You've heard, I'm sure, many drashot and insight in Divrei Torah on the difficulties that we have with it. I'll share with you a fascinating midrash. The midrash tells us the following. Keshena'ar katan rabo makeu umelamdo. If you have a little child in the Altaheim, not here. So what happens in the Altaheim when you come to Cheder? That the Rebbe would come, the Melamed would come with a stick, right? Some of us, I actually lived in Israel as a little kid, and they get news a bit later there. Like the Surgeon General not to smoke of 1962, it came to Israel in 1992. And they're still trying to deal with it. But that aside, they get a little. It's a rumor. They call it fake news there. So Keshena'ar katan rabo makehu, when the child is hit by his Rebbe, kevan shehigdil, if he matures, what is there an expectation? There's an expectation that when he's 6, perhaps, he needs the shtekel, he needs the stick. But when he gets a little bit older, there's an expectation that the dibur meyasro, that a word is enough. That if the head of the yeshiva turns to the student and says that behavior is not appropriate, the word itself is enough to have the proper impact. So too, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Moshe, listen, true, years ago, in the beginning of their journey in the wilderness, You needed the staff to go ahead and produce water, but now, אבל עכשיו ודיברתם אל הסלע. Now you shall talk. I wanted the people of Israel to know that, yes, there's a staff here, but now I don't need it anymore. Now my word is powerful enough. It's like they say in the name of Teddy Roosevelt, that the foreign policy, perhaps it was Madison in the United States, that good foreign policy is to hold a big stick. Speak softly and carry a big stick. Okay? So this is what's happening here. Words should have had the proper impact. So you made a mistake here. Yes, I told you to take the stick with you, but that wasn't for the sake of using it. It was to show them that words can have the proper impact as the nation matures. So commentators explain, and this is something my father would address often, is that we as Jews believe that the world is going to progress, and it is perhaps progressing, where a time will come where wrong and right is decided not by power and not by airplanes and missiles, but rather by the word of God. That there is going to be times.
לא סיטי מכשול לפני אדם. The stick was really a מכשול.
Yeah.
So why did he ask him to take his stick if he wants him to speak?
There's no question that it seemed that's part of the problem. He told him to take the stick, right? He told him to take the stick. So it's as if he put a stumbling block. But it seems to be, or at least the approach we are going to take is, that by him holding the stick and not using it, there is a message there. The power of the word. And it seems to be that perhaps this sin, quote-unquote, of Moshe Rabbeinu is more of an indication of the level of the people of Israel. That they were not where they belong. If they would have been on the right level, he would have sensed that words should be used. And we as a nation believe that when we talk about a messianic era, what's a messianic era? That the nations of Israel will come to Israel for guidance. What will make Israel the superpower? It will not be our missiles and it will not be our planes, which unfortunately we need now, and we are very, very grateful to the Almighty that they're quite impressive. No question about that. But we believe at a time that it will indeed come where Ki Metzion Tetzet Torah Dvar Hashem Yerushalayim. There's going to be the word of God, the power of the word. Progression of humanity is progressing from sword or physical power to the word of God. And if the nation would have been on the right level, he would have used that word and would have brought them into the land of Israel, and it would have been a different type of entry, an entry that where they are guided by Moshe Rabbeinu. This would have been a different existence, from sword, from power to word. This is how this specific area was analyzed by my father. Without going into the many details, what always seems to be the message you take is we are in an era where words are very, very significant. You think about the fact that the power the media has, the power Twitter has, the power that people's lives are destroyed by the media, right? In other words, when you can have a mistake, or when you have these these kids that are sitting there with these devices, like when you walk down the street downtown and you see someone that is not holding the device, you ask, what's wrong with them? Like, don't you know that you're supposed to be controlled by it? And even I'm myself sometimes guilty, and we want to know the latest. And there's a tremendous power that it has. You heard something, you forward it to the next person. We are in an era where word indeed becomes significant. We are praying that the day will come where it will manifest itself in a positive way, where the word inspires us to do right, and the maturity of the people of Israel will occur then. The third message. So did we get, what was the second message?
Progression.
So we hope for that progression. But now the third one is, what was the third message? Oh, it's a good class today. A grateful existence. Please turn to page 848. 848. So last message. By the way, you go sometimes by plane and there's a delay. Have you ever had that? You love it. So I remember hearing that you get delayed, and we all know that there's a schlep, right? And it's such a pain, especially if you fly to LaGuardia or you fly out of LaGuardia. There's guaranteed going to be a delay. But compare it, if you ever need something to inspire you to pull through those extra few hours you can be spending there in an airport where the only things you could buy is a $4 package of peanuts and almonds, is think about the journey of our ancestors. Okay, so keep that in mind as you turn to page 848, verse 4, where they are making the journey and they are making a roundabout way. And we are told at the end of verse 4, Vatiksar nefesh ha'am baderech, that their spirit, it is very tiring, and I'm very understanding of it. They were overwhelmed by this journey. And then when you are overwhelmed, negative feelings start developing. Negative feelings, we get agitated. You know how it works. We have those negative feelings and we feel, okay, we're not going to say a word, we're not going to say a word. And then one person says the wrong thing to you or something occurs and then it comes out. And usually if it's between two people, right? And they're both in a bad mood. That's the worst because this one starts saying and then things fall. So here they go. Things are going to fall apart in verse 5. They start complaining. Why did you bring us out of Egypt? Now, this is not the generation that remembered Egypt, but they heard legends, right? And those few good stories they would remember. There's nothing to eat there. What are we eating here? We're eating this lechem klokel, this food that is not substantial. It's not really tangible. It's something that is even harmful. So how does God Almighty punish the people of Israel in verse 6? You're familiar with it. God sent these snakes, these fiery serpents against the people. And many of them, unfortunately, died. So now they recognize that their attitude was not proper. Verse 7, Vayavo ha'am el Moshe, and they say, Chatanu. We recognize the fact that we made a significant mistake here by speaking against you. Dibarnu ba'Hashem baba. And now this is a nation that recognizes the power of prayer. Hitpalel el Hashem, pray to Almighty, v'yasar me'aleinu, He shall remove these serpents. Moshe does so. Fine, I would be satisfied here. But here comes verse 8, and this is a very fascinating and foreign recommendation by the Almighty. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe in verse 8, Aselach hasaraf, you know what you have to make for yourself to protect yourself? A fiery serpent, and we are told that it was made out of copper. Vesimato al nes, put it on a rod. V'haya kol anashuch, and you want to know how to deal with future snake bites? If you go ahead and gaze at this image, you will live. Verse 9, Vayas Moshe nachash nachosh, and Moshe makes a serpent out of copper, places it on the rod, and if a person was bit, they would stare at it and live. In the medical field, you've heard of the rod of Asclepius?
Asclepius.
We have to hear. So tell us a little bit about the rod of Asclepius. It's like a symbol of medicine from Greek mythology, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Right.
And do you have a Jewish feeling when you see it? Does it give you that Jewish feeling of, an image, a serpent, and that's how you get cured? Personally, I don't see it as a very Jewish thing, so therefore it needs clarification. And to prove to you that it's un-Jewish is that years later, this serpent lasted for a very long time, and eventually there's a king by the name of Chizkiyahu, and he realizes that the nation is supposed to use it as a tool to look up and to pray to God. And there's a Mishnah that tells us that the purpose of the serpent is for the Jewish people to meditate about the Creator, and it is to inspire them to turn to God. But what happens? It becomes something they turn to, period. It became problematic for proper religious observance. What does Chizkiyahu do? Got rid of it, destroyed it. Okay, so we understand the fact that he destroyed it, but we have difficulty a little bit with the whole idea. What is it all about? So, suggestions? So, Rabbi Shamshon Raphael Hirsch presents the following. You should know. The nation of Israel are traveling in the wilderness. This is an area, the Torah tells us that there was a Nachash, Saraf, and a Krab. There were snakes all around. Right? I remember we visited at some point, together, to an area where they resettled some people from Gush Katif. And it was an area in southern Israel. And Bnei Netzarim, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken. Was it Bnei Netzarim? And the guide is telling us how incredible it is, and we come to the shul. There was a nice looking, nice synagogue, and how they're trying to be sure that it's protected from missiles. And they're building homes and telling about the pioneers. And one of them mentioned that one of the kids in his bedroom found a scorpion or something. And it's just like a fact. In other words, yeah, my kid was playing with a toy, and this kid was playing. This was with a scorpion. That is, it's the desert. That is desert. You have scorpions and you have snakes, and you have a nation traveling through the wilderness. How did they survive? Right? Who took care of them? The answer is that they were in a region of chaos. And somehow, the Almighty protected them. Now, when God is protecting you and taking care of you, if you mess with Him, in other words, if you forget about Him, He's just going to remove that supernatural protection, and you're going to be in that state of chaos. In other words, when the snakes approached them, it was not that God had to go ahead and work out and communicate with a whole team of snakes. You know what, guys, I need some help here to punish. But rather, He just removed the providence, and immediately the snakes come, and the serpents come, and do what they naturally do in the wilderness. So the people of Israel have to remember that they are in a region of chaos. Our existence is really chaotic. The fact that we have survived, you study Jewish history, and you think about it, that we have survived with all these nations that hated us, with the Catholic Church, where it is an integral part of their faith that the Jew has to suffer. And somehow we are around, after being for hundreds of years in countries like that, to think about the Ukraine, and to think about Russia, and to think about these people and their attitudes towards the Jewish people and Poland, and to think that somehow, it proved very well during the Shoah, which we cannot explain, but we're still around as a nation. Let's face it, we are here. It is a ness, and that's what, writes Rav Hirsch, that a person, Yiskor, by looking at this serpent, what are you looking at this? What are you remembering there? You are looking at the serpent, and you are supposed to meditate and think, this is the natural state. What is surrounding me is chaotic. What is surrounding me wants to destroy me. What is surrounding me wants me to no longer exist. In the wilderness, they were snakes and serpents. In Eretz Israel, it's their neighbors. In the Galut, it is the nations of the world. You have to look at something to remind yourself of what is surrounding you. And then you appreciate your existence. That was the purpose of the serpent. Not that they looked and that somehow it's an omen to get cured. It's a reminder of the existence around you. Remember when 3 years ago we were in Israel, I took my Moshe to the Golan. And we were telling you to go to Golan, we'll go to this mountain, Bental, and you'll see a civil war. Right? Now, we meant you'll look into Syria, where there is a civil war. He gets up and he looks, and he was a little bit disappointed because at that time he did not see an actual civil war. But if you think about the Middle East, right, and you think about what was happening, Egypt calmed down a little bit. You think about Syria now. And the fact that over the past few days, there were a few of tank shells that landed in Israel, right? And Baruch Hashem, we are somehow, and you think about the distance from here to Eglinton, right, is the distance that when you are in Golan to the actual civil war. And you think about what's happening in Sinai, right? You have ISIS there. You think about the Middle East, the greater Middle East. If you step back and you look at the maps of Iran, and look at the maps of Iraq, and Syria, and Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, and you look at the attitude and what's being taught to their kids, and little Israel is there. Little Israel is there. We have that obligation to always don't look at the news too much, because it will have a negative impact on you. But look just enough to realize, look at the chaotic environment, and look at the success that we have a homeland. Look at us, not just a homeland, one that has inspired those members of planet Earth who are willing to look at what incredible things we have done. We are surrounded and we survive. We have to look at our serpent today has to be to recognize the world is chaotic around us. And yet we are around, and yet we are successful, and yet we are doing some incredible things. That is what the serpent is for. It's not an omen, it's not something that is a good luck charm, but rather it is that reminder. Look what's happening around, and you have to take an historical perspective to appreciate it. You have to look at the Middle East look at the geography to appreciate it, but at least what we have is a little bit of a way of dealing with it. And we don't walk away with a pagan attitude when we read about the serpent, but rather in understanding. Look, think at what surrounds you, and be appreciative to God Almighty, and recognize that that is for us to fulfill our responsibility as good Jews and good people. I thank everyone for coming. No class next week. We will have a class in 2 weeks. We will have a class. We'll see how it goes. It's going to be a summer class, but the same Torah and the same Parsha. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful day.